Again, welcome. This is my NBA recap, guys. This is the 10th version, week 10 of covering these NBA podcasts here. It's been going pretty cool so far, and I hope you've enjoyed the journey so far. My name's Remy, Ren City. I have a podcast, Sports and Shorts of Sorts. Can't always fit the NBA stuff in there. That comes out every Monday. So later in the week, we're gonna do it Fridays now. I have more time. It just works. So let's jump right into it. Let's talk NBA. Let's talk about the week that happened, how your team did. There's some big trades going down, some big storylines, some streaks ending. And yeah, we'll get to all of it. We'll start in the East. We'll start with the Atlantic Division. Team I've started every podcast with because they've consistently been the best all season. Best team in the East, the Boston Celtics. They went 2-1 this past week, almost giving up a big lead to the Raptors, but holding on to the win. They'd go on to beat my Spurs, dominating them the whole game, and then they'd lose a very close one to the Oklahoma City Thunder. Excuse me. Porzingis and Tatum each had 30 or more against the Thunder, but it wasn't enough. And despite that loss, the Celtics team is still the real deal. That three-headed monster of MVP candidate Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, and Kristaps Porzingis. That's the real deal. Jrue Holiday, Derek White, they handle the rest. Their bench seems to be doing enough to get by, but these starters, with starters like that, do you need a bench? You do need a bench, and it's, Pritchard does what he needs to do, Cornette does what he needs to do, but those starters, there's something else. They're amazing. It's health, really. Can Porzingis stay healthy the whole time? He's the question mark there, but right now, they are the exclamation marks real. The Celtics are real. Next up in the Atlantic, the team that sits third in the Eastern Conference, the Philadelphia 76ers. Sixers went 2-1 this past week. MVP candidate Joel Embiid, he missed 2 of the 3 games as the Sixers split the 2 games without him. They went into Houston and won a wild one. Looked like the Rockets had it locked up, but Tyrese Maxey went nuts. He dropped 42 and helping the Sixers get that win. Very next night, tough back-to-back, they'd go and lose to Chicago. You could tell they were exhausted after that big Houston win. And then the next game would be a rematch with the Bulls. And Philly would get their big man Embiid back. He'd go off. At one point, Sixers were up 73-42. Embiid fucked around and got a triple-double. Finished with 31 points, 15 boards, 10 assists. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. With Embiid in this lineup, they're a title contender. They could beat the Celtics. They could beat anyone. He's that good. When he's out, Maxey seems to hold down the fort enough with Tobias Harris and Kelly Oubre doing their thing, but with Embiid, like, title aspirations. But next up in the Atlantic, I mentioned major trades, and this is the team that was involved, the New York Knicks. They stayed in the division. They stayed with a team that they sued earlier in the season. The Knicks traded with the Raptors. Knicks received OG Anunoby. We were wondering if it's going to be Anunoby or Siakam, both. Who'd get moved first? Here's your answer. New York receives Anunoby, Precious Achua, and Malachi Flynn. The Raptors got their Canada-owned RJ Barrett, Emmanuel Quickly, and a second-round pick. Big splash. Knicks get a player in OG who they believe is the final piece in their championship aspirations. He was part of a championship team in Toronto. Even though we missed the run, he had that emergency appendectomy, so we didn't go on the playoff run. They did really well in his absence, but he's a great player. I'm going to miss him in Toronto. He was something to watch. And as he did in the playoffs, as he said, he doesn't shoot to miss. On the court, Knicks went 2-2 this past week. They dropped a game in Orlando, which would turn out to be and Quickly's last game in a Knick uniform. They didn't get thumped by the Pacers as they had a depleted roster post-trade. Then OG would make his debut for the Knicks in Madison Square Garden as they hosted the best in the West, the Minnesota Timberwolves. OG was huge on the defensive end, and Julius Randle went off as the Knicks took the win. OG's second game, as good as his first. Randle and Brunson both went off offensively, and OG held it down on the defensive end. They're 2-0 since this trade. And, big shout out again to Isaiah Hartenstein. We've talked about him last episode. He's got a big role to fill with Mitchell Robinson out. Jericho Sims has been dealing with injury. He's been thrust into a larger role here with, like I said, Robinson out for the year now, and he had a 10-point, 20 board game against Andre Drummond and the Bulls. Like, it's a pretty good night for him. Well, I think this trade should really work out for the Knicks. Like I said, OG, he's the guy that I think they wanted RJ to be. But OG is that guy, and he's going to fit in well. He already has. It's a small sample size, but he's looking good there. I don't see Malachi Flynn getting as much an impact. It's a very busy backcourt already in New York. I don't know where he's going to fit in. But I mentioned those injuries up front and how Hartenstein's holding it down. Precious Achua, if he can get going, if he can get the trust of Tibbs, he can get some minutes here. But staying in New York, we go to Brooklyn. We go with the Nets. Rough week for the Nets. They look bad. They went 0-4, losers of 5 in a row now. All 4 of those recent losses were on the road. They went into Washington, lost to the Wizards. That's not always a good thing. They then got blown out by the Thunder and the Pelicans. Those are 2 tough teams, but against the Pelicans, 3 Nets really stood out in this one. Spencer Dinwiddie, Royce O'Neal, and Cam Thomas combined for a whopping 0 for 23. That's pretty bad. They couldn't throw it in a garbage can if they needed that night. They'd wrap up that road trip losing in Houston, and like I said, this team's deep. But they don't seem to have a go-to guy. It seems like Mikal Bridges should be that guy, but then you got Cam Thomas's gunning style. Does that make him that guy? Team's very hard to read. You don't know what you're gonna get every night. You got the Forrest Gump treatment, the box of chocolates. That's the the Brooklyn Nets right now. And they got some very interesting news here. They're the first team to be fined by that new resting rule that the NBA implemented. The Nets got fined $100,000. We mentioned this on the last podcast with the Nets game against Milwaukee. They seemed to rest everybody. No one was in the lineup. The starters only played 10 minutes, and I guess the league fined them $100,000 for it. Mikal Bridges spoke out against it, saying, "What are we doing?" And it's first fine of the new rule. We'll see how many come in. But yeah, there you go. The Nets got that first fine. We'll wrap up the Atlantic, and we'll go to the other team involved in that big in-season trade. I'm wearing the jersey right now, the Raptors. You got Scotty Barnes, Rep Scotty Barnes, not in the Subway commercial here, but Raptors went 2-2 this past week. They almost had that miraculous comeback in Boston, which would turn out to be OG's last game, and then they made that big trade with the Knicks there, and they were shorthanded against a really hungry Pistons team that were trying to avoid sole position of the longest losing streak in NBA history. Pistons pulled off the dramatic victory, and the Raptors found themselves again in the history books for the wrong reasons. They were victims of Kobe Bryant's 81-point game, which I watched. Great game, by the way. And now they're on the team that lost to the Detroit Pistons to keep them tied for the longest losing streak in NBA history at 28 games. But since RJ and Emmanuel Quickley have gotten in the lineup, the Raptors have been clicking. Beat a tough Cleveland team with some clutch play, and they went into Memphis and beat a tough Ja Morant team. Quickly had a team high 26 in that win against Memphis. And I think this is going to be kind of a Sabonis, Halliburton, Kings, Pacers turnout. But I think both teams are going to win this trade. OG, he's going to be that missing piece the Knicks have been wanting. And Coach Tibbs, he fits right in with what Coach Tibbs demands out of a player. RJ gets that freedom to play in his native land for the team he grew up rooting for. I think he's going to thrive in there in a lesser role. There's not going to be as much pressure on there. Emmanuel Quickley, he's going to be the best player in this trade, I believe. That 1-2 punch with him and Scotty Barnes, it's going to be lethal. You have the shooters where they need to be. You have a right big man in Jakob Poeltl. Underrated big man. I think this is the perfect mix. And with Siakam there, that's a very deadly combination. But what I think is Masai's going to see how well this quickly Scotty mix is, and he's going to be like, well, with Siakam's contract, we got to move him. So I think Siakam will get moved. I do like the mix, but with the contract situation, I don't think they're going to see it out. So where's Siakam going? I'm not sure, but I don't see Masai sitting on this trade deadline's February 8th. we're going to see another trade here, but you're going to see some Raptor wins right away here. Like I said, both teams should be victorious in this trade. You're going to see them battling it out for a playoff spot maybe down the road, but we'll see. Lots of Atlantic talk, but now we're off to the Central. Leaders of the division, Milwaukee Bucks, current number 2 in the East. Went 2-2 this past week, beating a tough Cavs team in Cleveland. But the Bucks have had some issues with their division rivals, Indiana. They lose at home to Indiana, and then they lose on the road to Indiana. So just something about the Pacers they can't beat. But then they'd have an amazing game last night in San Antonio, the first actual meeting between Giannis Antetokounmpo and Victor Wembanyama. It was amazing to see an MVP, NBA champion going up against the future of the league, the unicorn, alien, whatever you want to call him. Giannis did enough late to get the win. He 44 points, 14 boards, 7 dimes. Huge night. Bit of troubling news in that game, though. Chris Middleton would leave with a back injury and not return, so hopefully that's not too serious because he's a very important piece of this team. This team's they're still figuring it out, We're not even halfway into the season. ESPN's Kendrick Perkins said no one should fear the deer right now, and it's deer hunting season. I don't know if I'd go that far. This is still a title contending team. They got to iron out some wrinkles, but they're the real deal. We'll see what happens with Middleton, and I think as long as they don't meet the Pacers in the playoffs, it could just be one of those matchups that don't work. Ask the 2007 number 1 seeded Dallas Mavericks about matchups and the We Believe Golden State Warriors. So, but other than that, I'm not worried about Milwaukee. They're still figuring it out, and they'll get it here. Next up in that division's that Pacers team I was just talking about. They jumped over the Cavs in the division, going 3-0 this past week, beating up that depleted post-trade Knicks teams, and they beat the Bucks in back-to-back games. We all know this Indiana team can score on anybody. It's just the defense questions we're always about. Halliburton continues to look like one of the best point guards in the league, leading the league in assists. He's doing what he's got to do. This team has 8 guys averaging double figures. It's always who's going to be that second guy behind Halliburton. He had two games of back-to-back games of 20 points, 20 assists. He's playing some elite ball right now. And they have some tough games coming up against the Hawks and then back-to-back games against the Celtics. So that'll be a real test on the Pacers here. I imagine the Celtics still aren't too happy with what happened in the end-season tournament. So we'll see what happens in those matchups in the upcoming week. Next up in the Central, those Cleveland Cavaliers I just mentioned, they went 1-2 this past week. They got some good news, though. Donovan Mitchell returned to the lineup. It wasn't enough in the game against the Bucks as the Cavs dropped that. And then they'd lose a tight one to a new restructured Toronto team. Then they'd return home and smash the Wizards. So they do have a rematch with the Wizards today, so I imagine they'll get that win too. Mitchell's fit seamlessly back into the lineup as you imagine he would, putting up his big scoring numbers. Gotta love the consistent play of Jared Allen of lately. He's putting up big rebounds, big numbers, really shouldering the front line with Evan Mobley still out with his injury. And, they're still holding the fort down pretty good, but this team does need Evan Mobley back and Darius Garland. He's still out with injury. They're just not the same team without those guys. And a bit of a bummer for the Cavs. Ricky Rubio, he's been away for the team for a while on a mental leave here. Before playing in Spain this past summer in the World Cup, he said, no, I can't play. I have to take a leave. And he hasn't been playing basketball since. I guess they mutually came to an end in the contract, which is a bummer. He said he appreciates people respecting his privacy, and he will later, let everyone know what's been going on. But main thing is he's been working on himself, figuring it out. Sometimes things are bigger than basketball, and he's figuring that out. Just to hate to see him leave the game. I always love watching Ricky Rubio play. But next up in the Central, you got Chicago Bulls. Went 1-2 this past week. They hosted the Embiid-less 76ers and got that big win. And then, like I said, in the rematch, Embiid returned and got vengeance for his team. The Bulls then would have a dreadful second half, dropping the game to the new-look Knicks. But his team's still trudging along without Zach LaVine and Nikola Vucevic. They had some highs. They're having some lows right now. Kobe White continues to look like a great piece for the team. Still lots to do with this team. You don't know, are they going to stick with them and ride it out, or is someone getting shipped? Like I said, the trade deadline's less than a month away, so we'll see if this will be the same Chicago team by this point. next month. Wrapping up the Central, we go to Detroit. They did it. They won a game. They broke the streak, ending it at 28. So they share that record with the dreadful losing streak of the Trust the Process 76ers of late 2014-15, early 2015-16. No, they didn't have a parade or anything. They got the big win. They went 1-2 this past week. They ended the streak against a Raptors team who had just made a trade earlier that day, so they were a little depleted, but sometimes the stars need to align, and it did for them that night. And they almost lost it. They were up, and the Raptors almost came back, but the Pistons did enough to get to escape with that monumental win. But they went back to their losing ways the next game, getting blown out by the Rockets, and then they were in like perhaps one of the games of the season, if you would have guessed it, between the Pistons and the Jazz. So when it went to overtime, Jazz hit a shot to go up 3 really late. Alex Burks got the ball, hit a buzzer beater to force overtime. The Pistons lost in OT, but a very exciting game, and hopefully they can get their next win before going almost 30 games again. So we'll see. Moving in the last division, the East Southeast Division, the Miami Heat, currently fourth in the Eastern Conference. They went 1-2 this past week. They didn't have Jimmy Butler's services for those games. They'd lose a tough one in Utah, and then they'd follow that up by getting blown out by the Clippers. But they made it up by beating the other LA team, winning a good one against the Lakers. Huge team effort in that one. 8 different Heat players got double figures. Tyler Hero leading the way at 21, and rookie sensation Yami Yaquez Jr. played huge, hitting a sick fadeaway over LeBron James. The very humble Yaquez after the game said he's keeping that video and he's going to show his kids when he has them. Just such a cool moment. You got to love what this guy's doing. It must have felt nice to be hitting that shot out in LA. He went to school in UCLA. He's a California kid, and that must have been pretty good for him. You got to love the way he plays. And even with Butler out, this team just has next guy up mentality, that Heat culture, as they say. I'm not worried about the Heat. The Magic, they went 1-3 this past week, and they were all tough games, rolling tough teams. They'd win a home game over the Knicks, but then they'd go on the road and it'd be a tough go. Losing a close one to Phoenix, following that up by losing a close one to Golden State. Then they'd have a doozy with Sacramento, a thrilling game going to overtime where Paulo Banchero would drop 43 points, and they'd come up a little short as the Kings took that win. And then adding literal insult to injury, Franz Wagner, he only played 5 minutes in that overtime game. He had to leave with an ankle injury. Hopefully it's not serious, as he's part of that two-headed beast with Banchero. So hopefully, yeah, like he can return sooner than later, because they have some tough games coming up. They play the Nuggets, Hawks, and Timberwolves. So we'll see if they can weather the storm without the German in the lineup. Then you go next in the Southeast, the Atlanta Hawks. They went 1-2 this past week, losing at home to the Kings despite 6 Hawks reaching double figures. They follow that up by winning two. Sorry, they follow that loss up by winning 2 close games, squeaking one over the Wizards, and then shocking the NBA world by winning at home against a very good Thunder team. The Hawks had 4 different players going over 20 in that one, and 7 players in double figures. The high scorer of the bunch was Jalen Johnson. His team's just better with him in the lineup. He returned to the lineup in that loss against the Kings, and he's been part of this 2-game winning streak. He was out with that wrist injury, but since he's come back, he's definitely put his name in the hat for the most improved player of the year. They're just better with him in the lineup. Wins and losses make a difference, but his numbers are making a difference too. Great things with him in the lineup. Hopefully they can make a turn here, the Hawks. Excuse me, wrapping up the Eastern Conference, go to the capital of the U.S., and D.C. and the Wizards. Wizards went 1-2 this week. They won one against the Nets, we talked about earlier, and then they'd lose a close one at home to the Hawks, before getting that big blowout loss against Cleveland. This Wizards team, they're giving you a close game or they're getting blown out. There's no in between. Kyle Kuzma continues to have a great career season for him, and other than that Cavs game, I'm really liking the developing game of Denny Avdia. He's playing great basketball, and I still think let's go more Tyus Jones, less Jordan Poole. I feel it's better, but hey, I digress. Off to the Western Conference, starting in the Northwest with the best in the West. Minnesota Timberwolves, they had a bit of a struggle. 1-2 this past week, losers of 2 in a row. They won a close one over the Lakers. Edwards carried the load in that one, and Naz Reid played huge off the bench when Cat had a lackluster game, but that's what you got to do for teammates. But like I said, the Wolves would drop the next two, and then they were tough games. They'd lose to the new look Knicks there with OG playing some good defense, and then they'd lose at home to the Pelicans. Rudy disappeared in that one. Must have a fear of big birds or something. But a tough week coming up for the Wolves. Some inconsistencies in the front court is really unlike them. So I'm wondering if it was just a lull, a matchup issue, or what. But you had Cat's quiet game, you had Gobert's quiet game, and well, they have some tough tests coming up. They have some road trip stops in Houston, Dallas, Orlando, and Boston. So we'll get a good look at who these Wolves are here. Number two in the division and number two in the Western Conference, the Oklahoma City Thunder. They went 3-1 this past week, going into Denver and ending the Nuggets' 6-game winning streak. They returned home, crushing the Nets, and then they beat the best team in the East, the Boston Celtics. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander showed the whole country again why he's leading the MVP race. Well, at least in my eyes, anyway. The very next night after that emotional win in Boston, they'd play Atlanta, and they'd go down early and they'd come back and they'd almost win. But credit to Atlanta and Jalen Johnson, who I just alluded to earlier, they held them off. So big win for Atlanta over the Thunder. But then the Thunder, you know, that's the way she goes sometimes. You know, after a big win on a game of a back-to-back, you're gonna lose the next one. But you know, being the second youngest team in the league, sometimes you can bounce back a bit. They're 8-2 in the last 10. They can beat anyone. People should fear them. They're one of the best teams in the league. They got some easier games this week, but they can't let up, and I don't think they will. Mark Daigneault has them playing great. He's got to have his name in consideration for Coach of the Year alongside Chris Finch. I've been barking up that Timberwolf tree all year. But, I mean, my preseason pick was Rick Carlisle. I mean, he could still get that, but I don't know. Those guys kind of have snuck ahead. But anywho, sticking with the Northwest Division, sticking with third in the division and third in the conference, you can see which has been the best division all year. But the Denver Nuggets, defending champions, went 2-1 this past week. Like I said, they had that winning streak ruined by Oklahoma City, but they'd start a new one. They'd beat the Hornets before going on the road and winning a tough one in Golden State. This game last night was crazy. Looked like the Warriors had it won. Up 18 with 6.5 to go in the fourth quarter. Nuggets went on a 25-4 run. It was wild. The game tied and the ball in the backcourt. Nuggets threw it to Jokic because, of course, you throw it to your center to bring it up. He dribbled it over half court and drilled a casual 39-footer off the glass. Buzzer beater, shocking. Steph Curry's jaw dropped. The emotion of Jokic, you'd think his horse just won a race or something. And then after the game, he was getting interviewed by Charles Barkley, and he's like, "Hey, big man, did you call glass?" And he's like, "Hey, it went in. I'm happy." You gotta love Jokic. He's a funny dude. His team's been playing great. Gordon's returned from that dog bite. He's been doing awesome. Jokic had 34 points, 10 dimes, 9 boards in the win. Gordon, like I said, he's back, 30 points. Murray had 25. Peyton Watson, who was filling in during Gordon's absence, he had big minutes in this one. He's becoming a legit threat off the bench. They just seem to find these guys. And this team can repeat, you know. Defending champs are playing some really good ball right now. Next in this division, the Utah Jazz. The Jazz went 3-0 this past week. They're playing some damn good ball. The last episode, I said this team could surprise people, and they have. I love Colin Sexton in the lineup and Jordan Clarkson coming off the bench. It's looked so good. Let's not forget about rookie Keontae George. His minutes have been huge. Proof of that in the Jazz home win over the Jazz where he went off. Jazz would follow that up by blowing out the Mavericks. Jordan Clarkson had a triple-double off the bench, I might add, in that blowout win. First Jazz triple-double since Carlos Boozer did it back in 2008. That's pretty wild. Shout out to Carlos Boozer. Haven't mentioned his name in a while. Then the Jazz won that thrilling overtime game with the Pistons I alluded to earlier. Lauri Markkanen 31 and Clarkson 36 off the bench. I was talking, you know, Malik Monk, Tim Hardaway Jr., Sixth Man of the Year on previous episodes, but with Clarkson back on the pine here, he could win that award. He's in the driver's seat. He's won it before. This team, you know, if they continue this trend, they could make it to the playoffs in the very tough Western Conference, or at least in the play-in. It all depends on injuries, and when they did have injuries earlier, guys like Simone Fontecchio stepped up. Remember watching him playing this summer in Italy in the FIBA World Cup? He's getting minutes. He's making them count. Love it. What Will Hardy's doing with this team is amazing. And Will Hardy's fucking 35 years old. Yeah, he turns 36 on the 21st. He's younger than me, the coach of the Utah Jazz. A little humbling. I don't drink anymore, but I felt like having one reading that sentence. But wrapping up the Northwest, we go to Portland. Blazers went 1-2. They beat the Wemby-less Spurs in a shootout, and they'd follow that up losing big in Phoenix and Dallas. Still without big man DeAndre Ayton, but they got Shaden Sharp back. And it looks like Chauncey Billups has that tough call trying to juggle minutes with all these guys. One positive is Scoot Henderson. He's been playing a lot more lately and getting some good minutes. Sorry, just got a drink here. Non-alcoholic, sorry, it's cranberry juice. Excuse me. But remember, he's the third overall pick in the draft, is still only 19 years old. So he's going to take some time here. He's got Chauncey and veteran Malcolm Brogdon in his corner. So he's got some good guys leading him here. We go to the Pacific. We go to the Los Angeles Clippers, fourth in the West, and rocking a 4-game winning streak right now. They went 3-0 this past week, beating the Grizzlies, giving Ja Morant his first loss is coming back. And then they beat down on the Heat before going on the road and beating the Phoenix Suns. Those last 2 wins had even more positive news for the Clippers as Kawhi Leonard returned to the lineup. And we remember Kawhi Leonard was playing like an MVP this season before his lingering injuries kind of kicked in. So with him in the streak, this streak can go even longer. And Clippers have some tough games coming up, playing the Pelicans, Lakers, and Suns, new look Raptors. James Harden said the critics are kind of quiet right now. He is. He's right. I questioned this transaction a bit as it happened, but they're working the kinks. So Ty Lue, man, we always say what a good coach Ty Lue is, and he's proven it again this year. And they're getting their chemistry worked out here. Said Mason Plumlee is close to returning from injury, but he said he wants to play behind Daniel Tice because he doesn't want to affect the chemistry. Like, these are the kind of selfless acts you see out of a championship team. And with Kawhi Leonard back in the lineup, you could say championship team. Without him, I don't know. But with him in there, they can do it. Next up in this division, next up in the Western Conference, Sacramento Kings. They went 3-1 this past week. They beat the Hawks, went into Memphis, beat down on the Grizzlies, hosted the Hornets, got surprised by Terry Rozier, and that trap game. And then Sabonis and Fox and Duarte showed up. They bounced back and won a thrilling game over the Magic. Sabonis had a triple-double with 22 points, 23 boards, and 12 dimes. Malik Monk also had 37 points and 9 dimes off the bench in that one. So it's a really good team that can do damage in the playoffs. They just need some consistency outside the duo of Fox and Sabonis. And next up in the division is the Phoenix Suns. Suns went 3-1 this past week. Got to see more of the big three. We witnessed KD, Booker, and Beal all on the floor together. Well, for a few games. They were all on the floor for a beatdown of the Hornets, and then a close, tight game over the Magic, where each of the three had their big moments. KD had 31, Beal 25, Booker 21. It was pretty good go for them, but KD would miss the next 2 games with a hamstring injury, and the Suns didn't really miss KD in the beatdown of the Blazers, but his absence was felt as the Suns lost at home to the Clippers. But Booker went for 35, and Beal went for 21 in the loss. But we'll see how long KD is out for with this hamstring injury. I just hope it's nothing crazy because, we just got these guys back and now they're already gone again. Like, you don't want to see that. But those are injuries, and that's the way it goes. We'll return to LA. We'll go with the Lakers. The Lakers went 0-3 this past week. They lost a close one in Minnesota despite Davis going for 33 points, 17 boards, and 8 dimes. And then they got blown out by the Pelicans despite LeBron putting up decent numbers. They then hosted the Heat and lost to them, as I alluded to earlier, with that Jaquez Jr. hitting that sweet fade on LeBron. Davis had 29 points and 17 boards in that loss. They're struggling, no doubt. Lakers are struggling. LeBron's quieted down, but he's in his 21st season. He can have a few bad games. You can't even fault AD. He's playing unreal basketball. Austin Reeves has been stepping up. Maybe does Taurean Prince get out of the lineup? I don't know. Do you want to start shaking the lineup up? Many are calling the Lakers brass to make a move, but I don't know. I think they should stick with this team. It's a good team. They're saying there's a disconnect though between Darvin Ham and the Lakers. So I don't know. When you're losing, all those little things are magnified, right? When you're winning, you kind of disregard them. But when you're losing, they're front and face, and you got to deal with them. So we'll see how the Lakers deal with them. And it's not going to get any easier. Some of their games coming up, they host the Grizzlies, Clippers, New York, the new look Raptors, and the Suns. And I think a little thing we got to watch, USC, they host Washington State next Wednesday. Why we mentioned that college game? Well, that's Bronny James is playing at home in that one, and it is in between a homestand of the Lakers. That game lands in between two games of the Lakers, so will LeBron be a little distracted by watching his son play? I don't know. You think it'd be a little distraction, but we'll find out. Wrapping up the Pacific, we go to the basement with the Golden State Warriors. Yeah, they're still lurking there. They went 1-3 this past week, all tough games. Losing a tough one to the Mavs, Luka did his thing, and Klay Thompson had, get this, 3 points in that loss. Tough to watch for a guy of his career, right? Warriors bounced back with a huge night by Curry, and seven Warriors in total had double digits in their win over the Magic. Then they'd return home and lose that game to the Nuggets I talked about earlier with Jokic hitting that crazy buzzer beater. Like, Warriors had it in the bag. They were up 18 with 6.5 to go. Chance to win the game. The game was tied. Curry was putting on moves. Instead of throwing up a shot, he tried this wild cross-court pass. It was intercepted. Denver called the timeout, and then Jokic did his thing, ending the game. Huge loss for the Warriors that have already had a season's worth of huge losses. Thompson bounced back a bit since that 3-point outing, and Kuminga is playing a little better. Rookie Brandon Podzinski looks like what a steal he's been. But this team just doesn't seem what they used to be. Curry carries them some night, but as you saw in this last game against the Nuggets, he forces things late where he doesn't need to, but that's what he feels he needs to do because he doesn't have the help. Maybe having Draymond Green come back? I don't know. He's still suspended indefinitely. There's been talks he's been back in the facilities, so I don't know what that entails to him returning to the lineup. We'll see, I guess. But wrapping up the team recaps, we go with the last division in the league, the Southwest. Starting with the division leading New Orleans Pelicans. They sit sixth in the Western Conference. It's wild that division leaders are sixth in the conference. It just shows you how deep the West is. The Pelicans went 3-0 this past week and have won 4 in a row. They beat up on the Lakers on New Year's Eve before trouncing the Nets in a game where the Nets couldn't throw it in a garbage can, like I said. And then they'd go on the road and beat the best team in the West, the Minnesota Timberwolves. The Big Three had a huge night against the Wolves. Zion went for 27, McCollum 24, and Brandon Ingram 19. Said once this team got healthy, they'd be a powerhouse. And I don't think they're quite powerhouse level yet, but this winning streak showing you what they're made of. The key is Zion. How far this team goes is all on that man's massive shoulders, and we'll see how far he can carry them. Next up, the Mavericks. They went 2-1 this past week. They go in Golden State, winning a shootout. And they go into Utah, and Kyrie Irving would return from the lineup. But maybe that distracted them from the game as the Jazz destroyed them. And the Mavs would bounce back and take that loss out on the Blazers, beating them by 29. Luka went for 41, Kyrie had 29, but they get some bad news in that game. Rookie pogo stick, Derek Lively, the second, he rolled his ankle bad and have to get help to the locker room. I hate watching rolled ankle injuries. It just looks gross. It's a bummer. They just got Kyrie back, but they lose Lively. We'll see if they go more with Canadian jumper Dwight Powell, or maybe we'll see more Grant Williams or Markieff Morris. Next up in that division is the Houston Rockets. They went 2-1 this past week. They'd have a breakdown and lose to the Embiid-less 76ers when Tyrese Maxey did his thing. They'd bounce back, beating up on the Pistons, who were riding their first win in 28 games, I guess, and then they'd beat up on the Nets. This team continues to surprise people. You cannot give enough credit to Ime Udoka. He's done amazing things for this team and the veterans. Even former Raptors coach and current Sixers coach Nick Nurse said a lot of this credit needs to go to Fred VanVleet. He coached him in Toronto, and he can see the impact he's having in Houston here. They picked up big wins last week, and they, like a lot of other teams, have some tests coming up. They got the Timberwolves, the Bucks, and the Heat in the next 3, so there'll be a nice barometer to see where the Rockets measure up. And some big matchups. Sengun going up against that T-Wolves front court, followed by his matchup against Giannis. Really looking forward to that. Walking in Memphis, the Grizzlies are next. They went 1-3 this past week. Ja Morant was returning from an illness, and it showed in the game against the Clippers. They took advantage of that and got the win. Grizzlies then hosted the Kings and got blown out before bouncing back and beating my Spurs. And then in that game, Morant had a dunk right near Wembanyama. I don't know if I'd call it a poster, but the fact you had Ja Morant at like what 6'1", 6'2", dunking anywhere around a 7'3" Wembanyama, it's pretty impressive. The Grizzlies would then lose to the Raptors with their new look, and so it's a bit of a tough week for the Grizzlies. Their first on-court struggle since Ja Morant's return, so we'll see what he does to help this team bounce back. I see them bouncing back, but they'll have some tough games along the way, playing the Lakers, Suns, and Mavericks. And you know what? I didn't even mention the Charlotte Hornets in my gig here. I was going through in my head, and I'm like, I don't think I mentioned the Hornets. So a quick shout out to the Hornets that went 1-2 this past week. They got crushed by the Suns, got crushed by the Nuggets, but they had that surprise win against Sacramento. Like I said, Terry Rozier balled out, and Miles Bridges went for 27. Where you had PJ Washington kicking in 17 off the bench. So sorry, no hate on any Hornets fans there. They just slipped through the cracks. But you know what? They still got a better record than my team here, the San Antonio Spurs. We went 0-4 this past week. We're on a 4-game losing streak. And follow up this rare win over Portland by losing to them. We didn't have Embiid in that one. We get him blown out by the Celtics before losing in Memphis. And then that game last night, like I mentioned in the Bucks recap, what a game. Wembanyama and Antetokounmpo. It was back and forth, freak play after freak play. It's like, what am I watching right now? And then you'd have parts where Devin Vassell would go off. He had 34 for the Spurs, leading them. Keldon Johnson, who's still coming off the bench here, he had some ridiculous layups, and what a dunk. You got to see his dunk from that game. It was pretty sick. And then this one Wembanyama sequence, you had Lillard going up for a layup. He thought he had it. Wemby pinned it on the glass, stumbled over, got up, and as the offense was going down, he got the ball at the trailer at the 3, drained it at his side. It is unreal. Then you'd have another play where Giannis was going up to dunk on Wemby, and he's like, no, 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 get that out of here. He didn't wag his finger. I kind of wish he did, but yeah, it was back and forth. And after Giannis made a huge play, got the Bucks up by 3. Spurs were kind of scrambling on offense. What are we going to do? We're down 3. They had a kind of a pick and roll going with Vassell and Wemby. Wemby got the ball outside the arc, could have forced it up. He had 2 guys right on him, but he did the right basketball play. He hit Trey Jones in the corner 3, standing right in front of his bench. He had enough time to make a sandwich, eat the sandwich, and finish his coffee, but he missed the 3. Nothing but iron. And you could tell the leadership of Wembanyama already. He went right up to him, and you know, you gotta tell your guys to shoot. You're out there to shoot when you're open. That's why you're on the floor. So tough loss for the Spurs, but you gotta love the fight on national TV. More people seeing Wemby. Maybe it'll help him in the Rookie of the Year race. But 27 points, 9 boards, 5 blocks going up against someone like Antetokounmpo, and that's on a minute restriction. After back-to-back ankle injuries, Wembanyama's been on a limit restriction. It was decided between the organization and the training staff, so hopefully he can get a little healthier because, yeah, we need more Wemby. I got a fever, and the only prescription is more Wembanyama, right? If we're going to honor Christopher Welkin here. But that's the 10th NBA recap by yours truly, Rent City. How's your team looking? I'm glad that epic losing streak's finally done, and we can focus on some positivity this year. Some players getting back, healthy players, huge dunks. Love it all. Let's quickly talk stats. Points leader, Philadelphia, Joel Embiid, 34 points per game. That's ridiculous. You have a few other players averaging over 31 a game. Dallas's Luka Doncic, OKC, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and Milwaukee's Giannis Antetokounmpo, our rebounding leader. Sacramento's Domantas Sabonis, he's got 12.8 per game. On a bit of a tear, the last 3 games, he's had outings of 21, 19, and 23. Those are big rebounding nights. 2 other guys averaging over 12 rebounds a game, Anthony Davis, Denver's Nikola Jokic. Assist leader, same guy, Indiana's stud, Tyrese Halliburton. He's averaging 12.7 a game. Trae Young second at 11.3. 2 other guys averaging over 9, Luka Doncic and Nikola Jokic. He's in everything. And on the defensive end, OKC's SGA leading the league at 2.5 steals per game. You got big man Victor Wembanyama leading the league in blocks as a rookie at 3.2 per game. Brooks Lopez just behind him. Or Brooke Lopez, not Brooks. Sorry, Brooke Lopez just behind him. From individual stats to the infamous Ren City top five, there's some changes, but nothing too wild. Number one, you still got the Boston Celtics. Number two, Oklahoma City Thunder's jumped up. Denver Nuggets right there at three. 76ers at four. And Minnesota's dropped a bit to the number five spot. Celtics stay at number one. They lost that tough one to the very tough Oklahoma team, but they're still doing their thing. Best record in the league. Three-headed beast I mentioned earlier: Porzingis, Tatum, and Brown. Derek White, and Jrue Holiday doing their thing. Excuse me, the Thunder had that one loss to the Hawks following that win to the Celtics. SGA continues to lead his team, second best team in the league. Just behind them is the Denver Nuggets. Only blemish on them was the Oklahoma City Thunder win. So all those top three teams are kind of intertwined there. Then you have the Sixers. They won a game without Embiid for losing one and him returning and showing what they are capable of with him in the lineup. Timberwolves lost those two in a row, but they still are in the top five. I see them bouncing back here. MVP discussion, my opinion has not changed the last few weeks. Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, there's nothing in this past week that has me changing my mind on that. What he's doing on this young team is phenomenal. He's doing it. He's showing more of the world. More people are talking about him. Let's have another Canadian MVP, shall we? But the race is far from done. There's a lot of seasoning at played. And like I've mentioned, Jason Tatum, Nikola Jokic, I've mentioned him in so many individual stats there. Giannis is in there. Luka, Embiid leading the league in scoring. You can't rule out Anthony Edwards, and Kawhi Leonard's back now. It is a popular race, but right now SGA and his long reach is currently leading that race. Rookie race, that game last night helped Wemby's stock a bit, but I still think Oklahoma City's Chet Holmgren's a little bit ahead in that one. What he's doing on one of the best teams in the league is huge. Anybody can put up on a bad team, but if you're putting up on a good team, that's something to look at. But he is also playing with a guy that might win MVP, right? So that also helps your game. But what Wemby's doing, it's not showing in the win-loss column all the time, but his numbers are ridiculous. And we still got to give more love to Miami's Yami Yakas Jr. He's doing phenomenal things as a regular guy in the rotation for a good Miami team. And also shout outs to number 2 and number 3 overall picks, Brandon Miller and Scoot Henderson with the Hornets and the Blazers respectively. They've been playing some good ball last week, even though I apparently subconsciously hating on the Hornets, skipping their part there. But I did, we mentioned they're 1-2 weeks, so shout out to the Hornets. Terry Rozier, they still need LaMelo Ball back, but hey, that's week 10 in the books. Like I said, some damn good hoops going on, some bad hoops going on, depending on which Wizards night you go to. Hope you're enjoying it with friends and family. Ball is life. Very interested to see how the Raptors and Knicks look going forward. I mentioned it earlier in the podcast, and I firmly believe that we're going to have a Kings-Pacers, Sabonis Halliburton situation. Both teams are going to emerge victorious from this trade. OG's going to be that missing piece. The Knicks are going to go on the run. Manuel quickly is going to he's going to be the spark the Raptors offense needed, and Schroeder can come off the bench now. This is all coming together, this magical puzzle piece. Masai, Ujiri is one step ahead of everybody. I bet he's a great chess player, but keep your eyes on the Jazz, because the Jazz man is testifying. A faithless man believes, as Lisa Simpson and Bleeding Gums Murphy once saying. But this young team's clicking. Jordan Clarkson's back coming off the bench. He wants that 6th man of the year. Look out, Malik Monk and Tim Hardaway Jr. Pacers are rocking the longest winning streak in the league at 5. 2 of those over the Bucks, so watch out for them. The West, the Pelicans and Clippers are on their long winning streaks with Kawhi back. That winning streak could go longer, and with that big 3 in the Bayou doing their thing, look out for them. The Bayou, I didn't mean to say Bio, but Bayou. Bayou. And then keep watching those streaks continue. Keep watching the hoops. We got some good stuff coming up. Keep tuning in, the sports and shorts of sorts, every Monday. I'm Ren City, y'all. Thanks for coming out. Ren City out.